Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome here to another episode of Lunch Guide. My name is Chef Andy, your regular host, and today I've got something really interesting prepared for you guys. Today I'm going to be coming in with something that really fits this season. It's a nice, beautiful, hot holiday season, and this is definitely something you'd be looking forward to on just an any day kind of a lunch break. So without further ado, let me just introduce the ingredients before we continue. So I'm going to be working with 1 whole lemon. I've got a few eggs there, some beautiful unsalted butter, some beautiful red grapes. I've also got some milk, some cut up pineapples there, some brown sugar, some flour, and some regular white sugar. I've also got some breadcrumbs, some sultanas there, some vanilla essence, some baking powder, some cardamom powder, and some cinnamon powder. So without further ado, I'm going to give you this chance now to grab your pens and papers, and when you come back, I'm going to show you how to turn this beautiful piece of dish into something you're all going to be able to enjoy at home. See you after the short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those who missed out on the introductory bit to the show, we are going to be making a beautiful pineapple and red grape crumble. So without further ado, I'm just going to start off by showing you how to caramelize your pineapples. And for that, you need a beautiful big hot pan. Remember, you need a bit of that room so you can be able to really give it a mix. I recommend to use the biggest flat pan that you have at home. And then to that, we're just going to dice up some pineapple, and the reason for this is basically, first of all, every time you're going to be using fruits to make a dessert, first of all you need to be able to improve its flavor by cooking down its sugars. Remember, once sugar hits a hot pan, it caramelizes. This is basically the stage where you actually infuse a lot of flavor into your fruits. So the first step with this particular dish is basically to give it the flavoring. So to that, very simple technique. So to a hot pan, we're just going to grab some brown sugar. So this is just regular brown sugar, and you can be able to get this basically anywhere within the city. All I'm going to do, so I'm going to just sprinkle about 2 tablespoons onto the pan. And all I'm going to do now is just give it a few seconds just to start melting. And the moment we just start seeing the bubbles, then we're going to add in the pineapples. The reason for that is you actually want to get that sugar caramelized and softer before you throw in your pineapples. Remember, if you throw your pineapples in too early, what happens is you're going to be making a stewed fruit, which basically means all the liquid in your pineapple is going to mix with the sugar, and instead of coming up with caramelized pineapples, all you're going to be getting is stewed fruit, and that is a totally different thing altogether. So we have our nice hot pan here going. I'm just going to bring the heat a little high now. So for this particular stage, you will also need just a small knob of butter. So I'm going to use about 1 whole teaspoon there. And to that, I'm going to just add some of that cardamom powder. And I'm going to add some of the cinnamon powder. And basically what you're looking for at this stage is you're just looking for just the consistency that should be able to slide on the sides of your pan before your pineapple goes in. And this is basically where you actually start to get to the caramelizing stage of your sugar. And remember, for this particular technique, it's always crucial that you take very much precaution when melting sugar, especially on a pan. First of all, it's the fact that if that sugar actually manages to spill and get to you, it really causes a third-degree burn, which you're trying to avoid. So I'll always recommend, if you're doing so, please make sure you're in good environment and you're away from any danger. So now we're just, as you can see, the sugar is just about sliding around the pan. And I'm just going to add my pineapple. So it should actually have that sizzle when it goes in. And all we are going to do now is toss it within the pan. So basically, some of the aromas you'll be getting right now, you get that bit of a burnt brown sugar smell, which is exactly what you're looking for. Remember, what we're trying to do at this stage is, first of all, you want to flavor your pineapple, and second of all, you want to make sure to cook off as much liquid as you can before the pineapple goes into your mixture, because once it does, you don't really want it to release so much juice or so much water, and that could actually ruin your dessert. Right, so we're just going to give those a few minutes to caramelize. Just before we leave that to continue, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of sultanas. I'm just going to give that a nice toss. Okay, so we're gonna just lower the heat a little bit. We're gonna leave it on low to medium. And now for the next particular process of the dish, I'm going to show you how to make the crumble itself. And it's generally also a very simple technique. So this is basically a technique that incorporates a method called rubbing in, and this is very simple. All you need for that particular stage is a bit of flour, a bit of butter, and a bit of sugar. So I'm just going to add some of my flour into the bowl. Remember, don't always put all your flour in at once. You can put your butter in all at once, but with your flour, remember, if you have too much of it at once, it's a little hard to take out. So I always recommend at least put in half, start getting through your mixture, and then continue. So in the bowl, I have about 3/4 cups flour, about 125 grams unsalted butter. And now I'm going to add about 125 grams of sugar, just regular white sugar. Just gonna give that a nice quick toss. Right, so our pineapples are nice and caramelized, so that's now ready. We're just going to leave those on the pan. We're gonna give that a bit of time to cool off. In the meantime, I'm going to show you a process called rubbing in. Now, the beautiful thing about rubbing in is it's a very common technique that is used in making pastry, especially making cake crumbs or crumbles. And the idea of this is basically to do it by hand. You can optionally decide to try and do it with a mixer, but it will not give you the same kind of crumb as you would with your fingers. So the technique is very simple. All you're going to be using is the fingertips, and all you're going to be doing now at this stage is you're going to just be breaking those nice big lumps of butter in your bowl. And what you want to do is you want to rub the butter and the flour against your fingers, just against your fingertips. And you want to do that with a bit of height, so you basically do it while lifting up. So this basically allows you to make sure that it doesn't become lumpy, and it also ensures that you don't press all your butter together and get this difficult lump of butter that you can't really be able to mix. So basically the idea is to just continue rubbing the mixture until it forms something very similar to breadcrumbs. And one beautiful technique of doing that is you can always have a bowl of breadcrumbs next to you, or you can just run your hand through some breadcrumbs and really feel that texture, and then just go straight into making your own. So remember, this process works 2 ways. You can alternatively add some cold water to this, and you should be able to make a very beautiful pastry case. This is especially if you're making a dessert or tarts for that matter. But as I said, if you miss the part where you add the cold water, all you get is some beautiful crumbs, which literally just aids you in making a very beautiful pineapple and berry crumble. So I'm just going to keep going about it for about another few minutes. So points to check on, always try and break the biggest pieces first and work towards just making them smaller as you continue mixing your bowl. I also insist always pick your mixture up and just allow it to fall into your bowl. This basically allows you to be able to tell how much more lump is in there. If you do notice a few more lumps, always add just a little bit of flour, not too much at once, just to make sure you don't have too much in your bowl at the same time. And all you're looking for is something in that consistency. So as you can see, about 4 to 5 minutes into making your crumble, this should actually be able to pour really well into your bowl. I also have tried the same technique by doing it this way and leaving it in the fridge for a couple of minutes just to get the batter to really get consistent. For this particular process, I won't be doing that because we are going to be baking this directly, and because we already caramelized our fruit, we are not really worried about it releasing any juices or any water while it's in the oven. So as you can see, that is done now. It's definitely ready. So that's about good to go. So we're just going to clean our surface there quickly. So some pointers to remember when making your crumble. If you're going to be using salted butter, be sure not to add too much baking powder or not to add too much sugar at once. Remember, the beautiful thing about a good pastry is actually about the balance, so you should be able to just get that umami out of it. You should actually be able to get just a bit of salty, just a bit of sugary, a bit of crunch, and that really actually consists into a beautiful crumble. So now to the bowl there, we've got our fruit here, but remember there's still a bit of juices in the bowl. So very, very important technique to remember. Always just take your fruit out once it's cooled off. Always take it out, leave it in a sieve. First of all, this allows your fruit. Remember, you're working with melted butter. And one thing you need to remember in this stage is if you add your mixture into the bowl immediately, first of all, it's going to melt your butter. Second of all, it's just going to end up making your butter melt, and your consistency of your mixture is not going to be as crumbly as you expected. And second of all that excess water turns it into a dough, so you're not really going to get the crumble you're looking for. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give this a shake. This is just to make sure I get all this excess liquid out of the mixture. So you may want to leave that a few seconds out. And then now to that, I'm just going to add my red grapes. You can use white grapes if you can't find these. So the grape, particularly in this recipe, it's just an addition that I've gone with for this particular recipe. If you can find the pineapples and you can't find the grapes, you can go with the pineapples just as they are. If you can find the dry fruits, you can also just continue without. So this is just, like I said, it's always just about trying to bring a simplicity and a touch to your cooking. So there are things that you can avoid in this recipe, and there's some that you just cannot. Okay, so to this beautiful bowl with the crumbs, I'm just going to add a bit of some baking powder. Then I'm going to add some cinnamon powder and the rest of the cardamom powder. Then I'm going to add a bit of that vanilla. So that's about a tablespoon of vanilla extract. And last but not least, I always insist a lemon is really handy, especially if you're making desserts. It really brings out the flavor of a lot of ingredients. But particularly for this one, I'm only going to be using the rind, which is just the green side, just the green part of the lemon on the skin. So this is actually not a bad idea to go with when you're making desserts with fruit. Remember, a bit of that zing from the lemon really brings out the flavors from your fruit. So always insist, if you do have a bit of lemon reserved on the side, always just incorporate it into your dish. Okay, so this is about done. So I'm just going to add, so in here I have about half a cup of dry breadcrumbs. I'm just going to pour about half of that in there. I'm just gonna give it a mix by hand. So as you can see, remember the mixture should always just stay as dry as you can possibly keep it before you add your fruit. Remember, this is the first particular thing about a crumble. It should not be too wet, it should not be too dry. But if you have your fruits cooked up and they're cooled off and they're ready to go, and you have a very, very dry mixture, you definitely have the best ingredients now to just complete your pineapple crumble. So I'm just going to give that a mix just to make sure I don't have any more lumps in there. That's about it. And last but not least, I'm going to add my pineapples with the raisins and the grapes. Go straight in the bowl. Something you need to remember before you continue with this particular stage, always have your oven just ready to go. So I've got my oven now set to 200 degrees on top and bottom elements. I'm just going to turn up my timer. And now this is a very simple way to finish this. All I'm going to do now is just use my hands to just get that crumble to coat the fruit. Remember, the idea is a crumble is basically just a mixture of some caramelized fruit that's coated with a bit of crunch around it, and a sauce goes with it on the side as well. And we're going to be making some homemade custard, so I'm just going to show you how to make that in a little bit. Right, so as you can be able to see from the cameras there, mixture is just nice and light, and there is not any bit of liquid in there. It's a very, very dry mixture, as I mentioned. So just before you complete that stage, one last thing before you finish off, an egg. This always just brings a bit of enriching into the dish. So I'm just going to crack one whole egg in there. I'm just gonna give that a mixture quickly. And your mixture should be very, 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 very light to the hand as well. And as I said, I like to work with my fingers because it allows me to break the pieces apart. Remember, mixing this by spoon, you might be very vigorous doing it and you might actually compress everything together, but when you work with your hands, you're actually able to separate the lumps. So now this is now done. Just going to rinse my hands quickly. And all that is left to do now is to transfer our mixture into a baking dish. I particularly like using a glass baking dish, but if you do have an aluminum or stainless steel one, you can always go with that as well. It'll still just do the same thing. Right, so I'm just going to use my spoon now just to try and give that one easy mix before we transfer all that into this beautiful bowl. And as I always insist, always pour your mixture from the center. Remember, it's a little easier to spread it out when it's in the middle, and that way you don't have too much of your mixture sitting to one side of your baking tray or your baking dish. Right, so very, very simple. So this is now going to go into a hot preheated oven. We're going to be baking this for about 14 to 15 minutes, just until we have a beautiful golden color on the top. All I'm going to do now is spread those out a little bit, just to get a nice, beautiful, even layer on the top. And then to that, I'm going to be grabbing that last bit of breadcrumbs that I had earlier. This is actually a technique I use a lot. I always add just a bit of sugar in there, and then I just give it a quick mix with my finger. The beautiful thing about that is it gives it a very, very beautiful crust on the top, and it's actually very, very sweet and colorful when it comes out. So all we are going to do now is spread that all over the top. I'm just going to give it a light firm press with the palm of my hands, and then just continue going on top there with the breadcrumb and the sugar mixture. Right, so this is about ready now. So all we are going to do now is we're going to throw this in the oven. Remember, as I mentioned, we're going to be baking it in the middle rack in the oven. Remember, we're using both the top and the bottom element. Remember, the idea is just not to color the top, but to also just get the crumble to really dry out in the oven. So this I'm just going to throw in there. And I'm gonna set my timer for about 20 minutes. So we're just going to give that a few more minutes to continue, and then we're gonna come back to it. But in the meantime, I would like to show you viewers something that actually a viewer had actually requested, and someone actually had written and insisted that they wanted to find out how to make custard from home. I know a lot of you folks at home are always eager to know how to make these things and try to make it fresher and easier and more likable for your family. So I'm now just going to show you a very, very simple technique of making your own custard from home. So very, very simple technique. First, I'm just going to get my burner going. So for this particular process, you're going to need just a few things. You're going to need about 1 egg. You're also going to need a bit of sugar. You're going to be getting some egg yolk, so we're going to split that shortly. You're going to need some milk and some sugar. So first process is to start heating your milk. So I've got about now 1 cup of milk that's in the pan there, and we want to just heat that up. So that will take a few seconds to get hot. And in the meantime, I'm just going to grab another bowl. And basically what we're going to do is we're basically going to heat our milk up till it's about just about over 60 to 80 degrees. So it should just be hot enough to be able to whisk, or rather beat into our eggs. Right, simple as that. So now this particular stage, very, very simple. Remember, you've got a nice beautiful pot there, and just a very, very simple technique to just dissolve your sugar a little quicker before you beat it into your sauce. I always insist, add your sugar in with your milk and just let them boil together. The beautiful thing about this is you actually eliminate any chances of having any sugar granules in your sauce. Okay, now I'm just going to show you how to separate some eggs. So very, very simple. I just crack the egg and I just take the top off like that. And I'm going to use the same piece of shell to help me separate it. So I'm just going to continue turning that in and out. So this is just one technique of separating your yolks from your whites. And if you're not so keen on trying and taking that much time, you can always just split your egg as I do now. And all you do is crack your egg and just let it pour into your fingertips, and it's actually one of the quickest techniques because all the egg whites just rolls off your fingertips and all you have is a beautiful egg yolk remaining. So that goes into the bowl there. Right, so we're just going to give the milk just a few seconds to heat up. Remember, this particular stage of the sauce, making a custard is actually as simple as you can see now. And one particular thing to be able to really pay attention to is, remember, when you're making your sauce, you don't really want to have any egg yolks inside your sauce. Remember, once you start pouring the hot milk in here, what happens is it turns into scrambled eggs. And basically what I would insist at this particular stage, always make sure to get as much egg white or all the egg white you can out of your egg before you pour your milk in. So our milk is now just starting to boil. It's just starting to bubble on the sides. So when it gets to that stage, I always insist, just take it off the heat. As soon as you can be able to spot any bubbles, just take it off the heat immediately. So all I'm going to do in the bowl now is I'm just going to start whisking my egg yolk. And all I'm going to do is pour the milk in slowly. What normally as chefs we call it pouring it down as a string, because you're not really pouring it in big amounts. And the idea of pouring it slowly is also to make sure that you don't pour too much and you cook your eggs. So it's quite a handy process. I always insist, always have your tools ready before you start this stage, because once you start whisking, you can't really stop. And now Now all you're going to do now is, once you have a bit of the mixture whipped up and stable, now you can just continue going slowly with the rest of your mixture, and you're just going to do the same until you get to the end of the process. Right, so all our milk is now incorporated in there. Remember, I'm not going to stop whisking. Remember, there is two particular things that could happen. If you do, you could probably either turn this into scrambled eggs, or your sauce will just split. So another thing that you need to remember is never throw that pan back in the water immediately. Remember, you are going to need it. So I'm just going to pour the same mixture back in the same pot. Just going to give that a quick mix. That will go straight back into our pot. And now this particular stage is basically where you start to thicken the sauce. So I'll recommend just have it going on medium heat. Now crumble is just going really well in there, so that's about another few minutes. So for this particular stage, you don't want to stop mixing, because the moment you do, you get the lump starting to form, you have your egg starting to cook, and it just thickens immediately. The beautiful thing about continually mixing it is basically you get a beautiful velvety sauce, and you actually eliminate any chances of lumps. So I'm just going to continue whipping that. So it will start forming bubbles, and it will start rising almost halfway up your pan. Don't be worried if that happens. Remember, the moment the sauce starts to really come to its consistency, you will notice that the bubbles will start reducing as you continue. So those are actually particular stages to watch out for when you're making homemade custard from scratch. So as you can see, it's now starting to look very, very, very bubbly. I'm just going to drop the temperature now, and I'm just going to whisk it slowly. And this process is basically now to just allow the bubbles to start breaking up slowly. And I always insist, always also bring it off and on the heat. Remember, you've been whisking it, so you've incorporated quite a bit of air, and it's why your mixture starts to come up. So always just continue to whisk it, but pull it off the heat a few times. This is just to make sure that it doesn't continue bubbling all the way to the top. So if you can be able to see, it's now starting to just slowly come to the bottom of the pan. Right, so the idea is to just continue whisking. Remember, one particular detail about sauce is the moment you incorporate a beautiful amount of air into it, first of all, it allows for no lumps. So this is actually one of the key stages you need to watch out for. And by lumps, I mean, chewy, disturbing pieces of fat that are just lying in between your sauce. That happens to a lot of people who make their own custard. Okay, so from this stage, you don't really have to whip it really fast. You're just going to continue mixing it slowly. And I always insist, when you're making your custard, take a bit of time, just keep mixing it. Remember, you already have a dessert that's in the oven. That's going to be about another 15 minutes to go. But while you're doing that, always just continue giving a bit of attention to your sauce. Just continue mixing it while it cooks down. And now we're just going to let that sit on some low heat. We're just going to let the bubbles drop, and we're just going to let the sauce thicken. And straight after that, it'll just be ready for straining. So as you can see, it's still bubbling up. So I'm just going to continue doing the same thing, bringing it on and off the heat just to get the bubbles to fall, and we should have our custard ready to go. So we're now going to take a small commercial break. We're going to clean up this beautiful table, and when we come back, I'm now just going to take you into the process of plating your crumble. I'm also going to show you what our sauce looks like once it's done, and then we're just going to close off the show at that note. See you after a short while. Don't touch that dial. welcome back. For those who missed out on what we were doing on the show today, we've been making a beautiful pineapple and red grape crumble. And this is now just about done. So we're just going to check on it quickly. Yeah, this is definitely good to go. Right, ladies and gentlemen, so this has now been baking for about 17 minutes. I'll say between 17 and 20 minutes to be safe. And it's just looking beautiful on the top. As I said, we were just having it in the oven to get the beautiful color off the top there. As you can see, very, very consistent color from the caramelizing of the sugar and the breadcrumbs. And the aromas, yeah, you do get a very beautiful caramel, more like caramel vanilla aroma coming right through. So I'm just going to slice this. We can plate it. Right, just going to give that just a few minutes to settle. And then just to bring you back to the pot that we had earlier. So this is now just about ready. I've been having it going on low heat. So we've got our nice beautiful custard almost done. I'm just going to show you what we're going to do with that now. So very, very simple technique of making a very good custard. I always insist, even after making your sauce, don't always believe that there is no impurities or any lumps in there. I always insist it's always good to just have another go through a sieve. This is just to make sure if there is anything in there that you might not be able to see with your naked eye, the sieve will actually allow you to take it out. So I'm just going to bring the temperature a little higher, and we're just going to get that to thicken a little bit. So beautiful, beautiful custard sauce there. Probably I could show you one of my most common checkpoints. And I'll do that with this beautiful wooden spoon. So I always insist when you're making your custard, you could always start off with your whisk and then switch on to a wooden spoon. Or you can work with your whisk right through, because this is definitely one way you could never go wrong, okay? So even just by looking at the sides of the whisk there, you can be able to see just a few of the lumps that were in there. And this is why I always insist, if you don't get a nice clean whisk when it comes out of the sauce, please don't be fooled that anything in there does not have any lumps. So which is why I insist, always just have a second go through your sieve. This is just to make sure most of the lumps or all the lumps that are in there are gone. So I'm just going to pour that through my sieve on the side there. Right, so as you can see, even from the sieve, you do get a bit of lumps there, but I always insist, just let that run through. Try not to squeeze those right through, because remember, even when they go through the sieve, they're not going to mix with the sauce. The consistency is definitely not the same. So just to finish this off, just a very, very simple technique of plating. I'm going to just loosen that crumble off the sides there. I'm just gonna see if I can get my spoon to go or to slide right underneath the crumble itself. If you do have a problem lifting it off the bowl like I am, always just grab a similar ladle or spoon to the one I'm using or the one you are using initially, and just use the two to get that lift off your bowl and onto your plate. So as you can see, as I had mentioned earlier, a crumble is definitely a very, very it's definitely one of the driest of dry pastries that you will find out there. But the beauty of it is, with a bit of improvising with some sauce, just like the custard we have here, you actually come up with a very, very beautiful dessert. So just to finish that off, we're just gonna give that a taste, and it's good. So very, very simple, just with a small spoon, and I'm just going to run that right over the dessert like that. Simple simple as that, and probably just a bit of sauce right around just to make sure you have enough for one serving. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, pineapple crumble with the red grapes and homemade custard sauce. You've been able to see it for yourselves. I'm sure now you're very, very confident and you're feeling a little better and a bit more confident about trying this on your own at home. As I always insist, it's always really lovely to hear from you viewers. So do leave your comments, do leave your inquiries, do leave anything in particular that you might have in relation to the show. Do leave it on our page on Facebook. My name is Chef Andy. I've been your host today. You've been tuned into Lunch Guide, and from my side and from the studios, have a lovely day.